So I think that when you ask good questions, it
Mm-hmm.
makes people pause a lot. I think that's a sign of a good
Absolutely.
question, right? Like you're just
Thank
like,
you.
that's a good question.
With over 20 years leading high impact events and partnerships across causes like education and health, today's guest knows how to turn vision into action and moments into movements. She doesn't just plan events, she sparks connection. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Carrie Williams.
Hi. Hi, Vance. How are
Hi,
you?
hi, I'm good. So, Carrie, let's just start at the beginning. What are some factors that got you interested in business management?
Yeah. So, so I ended up doing a Bachelor of Business Administration degree. That was my undergrad degree, and um, I actually started in a Bachelor of Science degree when I started university. And after the first year, decided that that wasn't really what I was interested in. I really didn't like dissecting living things and doing experiments in the lab. And what attracted me to the business program was it felt so real and felt so relatable. Like it was real life things that I understood. I didn't understand really the value of dissecting a dogfish. I understood the concepts of marketing and the concepts of accounting, and it just felt real to me. So that's sort of where I started being interested in business management. And then when I graduated all those many years ago, I felt that I wanted to use a business background in I grew up dancing. And so I was like, how do I combine my love of dance with business? And I didn't realize that that meant advancement or marketing or fundraising. I didn't realize what that meant it would be ideally like most likely a not-for-profit organization, but that's kind of how I got into business management, but mostly in the public sector because I started off being interested in dance. I was trying to combine what I really liked with my education. So
Right. So, what I can understand from the hobbies that you picked up growing up and basically what career path you chose involved a lot of putting yourself out there, right? Taking risks. Even when you switch from the science degree, right? It was a risk.
yes,
So,
yes.
what what factors help you take those risks? Because it can be really overwhelming for people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you would consider it a factor, but there was a certain amount of like confidence and just my life wasn't I guess the confidence was coming from a place where I really just had myself to think about. So I wasn't really concerned about the impact of my decisions on anybody else other than myself. And so I was very confident in order to to say, you know what, that's not what I want to do, and I'm not who am I I wasn't worried about disappointing my parents or anything. They were actually supportive of it. So I just made the change. So I think, sort of confidence. You don't oh I didn't know when I made the change that I wanted to sort of figure out how to combine my love of dance with business. So I didn't have that much clarity. I think it was just the confidence and sort of making a decision and just going for it, really.
Right. And in your journey, what would you say about connections? How important were they?
Yeah, to make the decisions and the changes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, very important. I think about those early days, the early days of my career. Um, I made some early career like job changes as well. Like I had a job right out of university. It was in banking. I didn't like it. And so I actually was put in touch with, so one of the guys I went to school, I was in business. We did our case, we were on the same case comp team actually, and we did a lot of work together. He had been contacted by one of our profs because our university was creating a new, almost like enterprise development, like an enterprise development center. And it was sort of like what Innovation York is, that kind of idea, like an incubator sort of center. Anyway, he had reached out to him and said, "Look, we're looking for staff." And he wasn't interested, but he knew that I wasn't all that satisfied in banking. And so he told me about it. And that's sort of how I made that connection. And I ended up leaving banking and going into this really creative, innovative sort of development center where I got to really do more work in and around the cultural sector, but also around supporting others building businesses, actually. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs coming through the center. And that's sort of where I got even more involved in um, like just using my business skills that I had learned and business planning and analysis and things like that. So that connection from university is actually what got me there. And then from there, I actually at the time I'm born and raised in Nova Scotia, so that happened at the university I attended, which is St. FX University in Nova Scotia. I made the decision that I wanted to move to Toronto, and I was deciding between Montreal and Toronto, and I decided on Toronto, really just because of I'm not bilingual. That's really the reason, but I really liked Montreal. Um, and my boss at the time even gave me a phone number of people that she really liked in Toronto. And so when I got here, I had an opportunity to connect with them, and my career has been sort of the 20 years you referred to in your intros, mostly been all here in Toronto in different organizations. So connection sort of got me to that job and sort of got me connected a little bit here once I got to Toronto.
So you have worked at the kind of incubators and you have seen entrepreneurs with like good ideas, but not those many resources.
Hmm.
So, what does good leadership look like when working with these teams that are often under-resourced but really mission-driven?
Right, it's such a good question. So your question is good. What does good leadership look like when you're under-resourced but mission-driven? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really insightful question, especially if you're talking about public sector work, because
Mm-hmm.
in the public sector or the charitable sector, you don't have the resources that the private sector has often, but you
Mm-hmm.
have the same almost expectations sometimes from your constituents, your customers, your donors, your volunteer. Your expectation is that you'll experience the service you're used to getting from another company, but it's not resource the same. So I find that's something that to become aware of when you're leading in private sector. Um, but I think what good leadership looks like in any sector is actually, you know, understanding that you don't you actually don't have all the answers,
Right.
and that you really do need to, like to your point about connecting with people, like connect with the people that you're reporting to, connect with the people that are reporting to you, with your peers, and ask good questions and listen. Because you don't have you might think you have an answer, and it might be the right answer, but oftentimes when you allow your thoughts to be um, influenced by the wisdom and thoughts of others, that it's actually better. And oftentimes leadership does look like kind of just talking and or sometimes people feel that I'm a leader if I have all the answers and I have all the power, and I have all the knowledge, the power, the answers, therefore I'm a leader. But I think good leadership is actually the opposite of that. I think it's you do have your knowledge and your power and your insights, and you know how business operates. It can't, it's so complex. It's so complex. You can't be successful just on your own unless, it's a you're a celebrity maybe and you have a celebrity brand. Even celebrity brands need a team behind them, right? So, um, yeah. So I think good leadership looks like listening and asking a lot of questions.
Right. So after looking at these new companies starting out, right? Um, what, so obviously you are advising them, but you're at that point in your life that you're also learning from them, right? So
Yes.
my question to you is, what is one thing that you have actually unlearned about leadership in this last decade, and it kind of made you self-reflect on your own ideas?
Also a good question. There's so many things that I've unlearned. Um, so this is might not sound like a business in answer or insight. But I'm going to share it because I think it's relevant in how we lead organizations. So one of the things that really came to the forefront during the pandemic. So when I think about my last sort of 10 years of being in leadership positions, in the center of that was the pandemic, right? And one of the things that really came to the forefront were diversity, equity, inclusivity initiatives, right? And for the first time in my entire life, I remember we were home during the pandemic. Um, and so I was seeing uh, on TV, like Disney was talking about Black Lives Matter, like on a commercial. Like I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Major brands, major Canadian brands talking about Black Lives Mattering and it was it was shocking to me as a person. I was like, I can't believe I'm seeing this. I can't believe I'm seeing this issue having this kind of platform in business. And the other piece of learning that was sort of happening for me parallel to that, and it started before the pandemic, but was Canada, the truth and reconciliation work, the calls to action from in the Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit communities across Canada, and understanding about the truth. Those 21, I think 21 calls to action to the rest of Canada around um, addressing the inequities and the crimes, frankly, that happened on this land. And one of the things that while I was going through this, I was experiencing talking about anti-Black racism in spaces and in ways that I never had personally, but also in my career in the workplace. I'm like, I have never had these conversations. I've experienced anti-Black racism from the moment I was born, but certainly once I entered the workplace, but I've never talked about it with anybody other than other Black people, really. And so that was happening while I was learning about TNR. And one of the things I ended up unlearning, and there was a lot of ricochet for me in the workplace. I was like, I'm not used to having a voice for this. I'm not sure that I feel safe, but this is kind of the call. And I would think I'm also a parent, and I would think about what do I want to tell my daughters I did in this moment? Like, what do I want to teach them? And it was all sort of coming together because it was my very personal life with my job where I'm a leader in a leadership position and being sort of asked to lead some of these dialogues and conversations. And it was a real ricochet for me. But one of the things I eventually unlearned, though, as I was learning about how at York we actually call it the um, DEDI, decolonizing equity, diversity, and inclusion, because the decolonizing piece is a call as a response to TNR. There's a long answer, sorry. But what I ended up unlearning was how much I was used to occupying the seat of oppression, of racism and oppression, and how, in order to understand decolonization and that call to action, I needed to take myself out of the seat and realize that I was also a settler, which sounds almost, I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but I entered into a lot of this work because I was so used to my own experience, my own journey, not even considering myself to be a settler because of my people's history and how we came to this part of the world. I had to unlearn always thinking that in any dialogue, especially in the workplace around EDI and DEDI, that I'm not I'm not always entitled to own the seat of the oppression, the oppressed person. And that for me, while you would never learn in business school, was a huge learning for my leadership at in my role right now, because all of these pieces of work and projects were coming into play in the workplace. As a leader, I was being tasked with sort of talking about it and sort of leading some of the dialogue, and then thinking about how to enact some policies into our event plans and things like that. But um, I ended up unlearning and breaking my relationship with inequity, which I sort of always held as it's just about me, when actually it's about many other people. And um, that unlearning was massive for me. And it really did change how I viewed how to enact EDI policies and what that looks like on an event plan even. It just changed my whole perspective. So yeah.
Absolutely, no, that was a very descriptive and really thought of answer, and I really appreciate you sharing that. But again, like all this experience, it comes with, you know, making mistakes, right? That's how you
Hmm.
learn, that's how you grow.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I believe that's my idea of resilience, where how long it takes you to get back to base level after making a mistake. So that's
Hmm.
my idea of resilience.
Hmm.
But what's one strategic risk that you took that kind of solidified your idea of resilience and what resilience is?
So in the workplace, like in leadership,
Yes,
a
in
risk I took
leadership.
in leadership.
Yes. Yes.
So I'll use two. So one was in the middle of the pandemic and
Mhm.
the uprising in response to George Floyd. One of the risks that I took was allowing myself to talk about that in the workplace. That was very risky for me. I will say that's one. I would say again during that time, I was new to the organization at that during that time, and I had been tasked with creating new events and new experiences. And I proposed a number of things that had never been done at the school before because it just wasn't the right opportunity for it, right? And so proposed things that some things that were considered not necessary or too risky or not what we do here. But fortunately, I had enough support and leadership support around me to sort of support the ideas and the concepts. And so it's risky to sort of try something new, try something innovative when most of the people around you don't think it's a good idea. But um, fortunately, there was enough trust in me to proceed with the new ideas. And then the resilience, I think, comes from, for me, I think when you try something different, that you're able to measure it and demonstrate the impact that it had. What did you learn from it? Either is it's going to deliver impact of some kind, or you're going to learn something new about either your constituents, your donors, or the organization itself, right? So you're going to learn something.
So I want to know more about your experience in the second situation that you described. So when planning these large events, how do you differentiate between things that are nice to have and mission critical?
I would always look through the lens of the guest experience, usually, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at things, whether they're nice to have or mission critical, it's how does it impact the guest experience
Mm-hmm.
or your customer's experience? And then it's
Right.
like usually a budget decision.
Absolutely. I understand that. And also like you are always you always point out and notice things about something what I can learn from your experience that that others don't realize. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think that organizations often get wrong while trying to scale their impact?
Not thinking through the execution enough. So I think, there's this book called The Principles, I think it's called The Principles of Execution, and it's a really strong, maybe you had it in your program, I don't know,
Mm,
but it really talks about how the concepts, like, and when you think back to, I don't know, well, you might not have been, there was a couple of years ago, well, oh my gosh, maybe even 10 years, 12, 11, 12 years ago, where um, Target, uh, the retailer, was opening in Canada. And it was like everybody, I was happy that Target was coming. It was great, but it wasn't successful. And the different sort of stories and articles that I read about it, they talked about how they took on too much, and I'm sure there's many perspectives, but the one that kind of landed most with me was they took on of a lot of leases, and the leases they took on were more expensive than, like, they couldn't rationalize the amount of space and what they had paid for the leases with, the inventory they could get there, and they couldn't keep it going fast enough and things like that. So, but what was at the core, what was driving their need for faster sort of replenishment of inventory was what they were paying in the leases, and they had leased too many properties. They had too many leases across the country, and that at the core, that's sort of what broke down the execution of rolling out these stores across Canada. Anyway, I think oftentimes when it comes to really good ideas that you're looking to launch something new or create a new product or a new event, is the breakdown is usually in the execution, and there's not enough time spent on really plotting out the execution and then figuring out how you're going to who's doing what, how are you going to measure it, how are you keeping score, how are you going to continually improve. Like, it's not the glamorous part of innovation, it's the actual almost painful work of being really intentional about how you're going to execute something.
execute to completely know how the execution will work. um, I believe you need to kind of prioritize long-term vision. And how do you ensure that long-term vision doesn't get buried in short-time urgency? Mhm.
We receive some professional development around just business planning. Just how do you plan like a marketing plan, basically? How do you do like a
Mhm.
marketing plan? And there was nothing earth-shattering in that you probably
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't learn in your own program, or you have to have an objective. It has to be measurable. You have strategies that sort of drive, and then you have tactics that support the strategy. Like it was kind of, that typical. But the one piece that was in there that I didn't learn in business school, I didn't, I don't see often, is that he actually started by saying you got to start with a vision.
Mm-hmm.
And the vision above everything else, above your goal of whatever, delivering 18 events a month, or uh, launching 18 brand new events in a year, or whatever the goal is, the vision is like something that is not necessarily tangible. It's supposed to inspire you, like it's supposed to maybe even scare you because it's just, not tangible. And so that to me, I think is something that I always kept when I started talking about planning, or, you know, one of the things I did was sort of relaunch, or I guess reposition an event that we had for sort of 20 years at that point. And so I think when you have the vision, and then when you start getting into the execution of that plan or change you want to ever do, I always find it grounding to go back and say, but if we want to be loved by everybody in the world, or whatever your vision is, or followed by everybody in the world, how do we get there? And so sometimes I find it's helpful to kind of bring sometimes work back to that sort of larger vision, which is, you may never get there, but that's the whole point. It's like you're just supposed to strive for something great.
Absolutely. And I feel like long term, if you have a long term vision, it'll be easier for you if you divide that into small goals that you can achieve weekly or even daily, right? Uh,
Hmm.
how has how do you so if you have a big goal in mind, right?
Hmm.
You have this vision to meet. What steps do you take to kind of make that rational and kind of divide that into smaller goals?
So divide it into smaller goals to achieve the goal, or to achieve the vision, do you think?
I would say the vision.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I would approach the vision in that logical of a way, because it's just supposed to kind of be inspiring. But if it
Nice.
came to goals,
Mhm.
like the goal under the vision, like, so if I'm trying to think of an example. The example the guy gave us in this workshop was Coca-Cola's vision was to be the number one consumed beverage in the world.
Mhm.
And the reason why that was a vision is it wasn't about being the number one pop or soda. It was the number one beverage. So anything you drank, wine, tea, anything, water, they were going up against it. So very controversial, right?
Mhm.
And then the goal was to ensure there was distribution in every country in the world. So to get distribution in every country in the world, that you absolutely have to break that down. Well, how many are we in now? How many countries are we in now? How many's left to go? How many countries can we get in per month or per year? Like you would start to break that down. But if the vision is like, but we just want to be the top consumed beverage in the world,
Mhm.
then you're not going to necessarily spend time thinking about, well, how much tea is consumed in England, and like you're not going to break that down because it's not going to help you, right? It's just more like, if we want to be the biggest, top consumed beverage in the world, then, well, we probably have to be in every country. Okay, now let's make a plan. We can quantify a number of countries in the world, right? And then you'd start to break it down. How long does it take us to launch in a country? 6 weeks? How many? Then you start to break it down that way. So that then within a year and a half, we're going to be in every country. You know, I don't think I answered. I don't know if I'm getting at what you want to get out on this, but maybe I should be using more event examples.
Absolutely. And it also says a lot about how to differentiate vision from like a goal, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because these visions are meant to be a bit irrational to some extent,
exactly, exactly,
right? Right. So that's what I
exactly.
got from your answer. And
Yeah.
again, like you have so much experience, and I want to ask you, what's one thing about business or leadership that you wish you knew 15 years ago?
I think two things. I think from leadership perspective that I really don't have to have all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that goes back to what I said earlier is like, I think great leaders listen and ask questions a lot, a lot. And I think in business, I think that to just embrace that the change is constant, right? And that the change is constant and that you kind of hold on to what you know to kind of give some structure, but that the change and the business needs are constant and to not fear it, right? And to not fear it. Because yeah,
I see. Right. So this experience didn't come overnight. It came from taking active steps date in your day-to-day life in order to become the person you are today. Right. So if someone shadowed you for a week, what would surprise them the most about your day-to-day?
what an interesting question. What would surprise them most? So I think that when you ask good questions, it
Mm-hmm.
makes people pause a lot. I think that's a sign of a good
Absolutely.
question, right? Like you're just
Thank
like,
you.
that's a good question. Because when people just kind of blah, 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 like either
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're not being thoughtful or it's not as strong of a question, but a lot of your questions cause me to stop and pause and think.
Thank you.
Um, what would be surprised about my day to day? I think like actually like one of my areas of improvement is actually like I think they'd be surprised by the number of meetings that I'm in and that I have. And
Oh,
I think that's an area of I don't put that on anybody else. I think that's an area of development for me. I need to, kind of come up with some strategies to be like carve time out so that I don't get booked or question why the meeting. And, somebody told me, my current boss, like decline meetings that don't have agendas, right? You know, um, I think they'd be surprised at the number of meetings I allow myself to take. I think I need to get better at that. Um, yeah, I would say that.
and solutions only come through collaboration, right? So taking the meetings that don't have an agenda, where you're just brainstorming, is all are also important, right?
They are.
That's how you don't constrain yourself to a particular way of thinking, and you need to kind of let your mind go into different places. Um,
But
but yeah,
brainstorming is an agenda. If that's the agenda, that's fine. I just
mm,
need to know what we're doing, right?
right. Is legacy important to you? Is that something you try to build through your work?
Legacy. So can
Yeah.
you explain a little bit more about what you mean?
So let's say a few years from now, after you retire and
Oh, yeah.
uh, you hang your jersey, um, what do you want people to remember you by? Is that something you try to build through your work?
I don't think about it in that way when I think about my legacy, about like what I want people to remember me by. But I do think about, to me, it's about when I hang my jersey, as you say,
Mm-hmm.
that everybody. who is left there still thrives. Like that when I leave, nothing collapses. It actually gets better, right? Because I think that's a sign of good leadership, right? Like it's not about me, right? It's not about me and what I know and all the knowledge in my head. It's about what system have I created? What, what programs have I created? What systems? How have I built it so that it's resilient and that it can scale? Like it's to me, the legacy is that things get even better, are in a position that they can even get better after I go, you know?
That's an excellent thought. So, good leadership involves building a sense of sustainability, right? Right. Your
Yeah,
solutions should
yeah.
like keep working for everyone. Um,
Or
but
or everyone makes the solutions better, right? Because like they're good solutions and then you're able to build on it, you know?
right, right. Now to kind of, so my final question to you is to kind of summarize everything. And I just wanted to ask you, what is the best piece of advice you have ever heard or received?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So one again came from learnings that I gained through learning more about truth and reconciliation. And it's
Mm-hmm,
that when you enter into a relationship or a collaboration with somebody, enter in it with the goal or the intent that it's actually stronger on the other side, not the other way around.
mm-hmm,
And so when you think about, especially in the workplace, when you're working with people, and sometimes they're really difficult and they get your last nerve, and if you think about as opposed to entering it in thinking this person is really difficult, how am I going to, get them to see my perspective on something? How can I get them bought in on a concept? If I approach it with, I'm going to just enter into this by trying to make a stronger relationship as opposed to convincing them about something, you know, that intent, that learning that I had the opportunity to gain has been one of the best things that I've ever learned and it's helped me better navigate relationships in the workplace for sure and connections as you talked about, right? I enter in it trying to make it better, not trying to overcome the person, beat the person down, be smarter, no, I'm trying to make a better relationship, you know? And then the other piece of advice I got from a boss, one of my first bosses after I moved to Toronto was, and on the surface it sounds kind of shallow, but it's not. I don't think it is. She said, ultimately our job is to make our boss look good. And I remember her saying this. I'm like, I didn't get it. I'm like, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to make myself look good. I'm here to build my own brand. I mean, right? And I was like 20 nothing. I was very young at the time. But I thought that now I realize how sort of profound that is, you know, you're here to support your leaders as well, right? And I see that as also I'm trying to support the people who are my peers and who are reporting to me. Like my job is to support people and to I'm not trying to tear anybody, like you think about, especially in events where we're in the background and our leaders are out at the lectern speaking, or they're working a room with all of these, major donor prospects and stuff. My job is to make sure that they look good when they work in the room. And it's not about their clothes, but they're prepared, they're supported, the environment we've created, the connection, the space we've created is a true reflection of what they're trying to do. That's my job. In its essence, I'm making sure that they look good. And I don't see that as I don't mean that as a shallow thing. It's a much more, I think, like a deeper thing than that. So, oh, does that make sense? Did I lose you on some of my concepts? I might have lost you on some of my concepts.
not at all. Like your concepts are so thorough that I need to think about them in the
Great.
moment.
Right.
So I'm
Right.
just trying to be in the moment as much as I can, but your concepts are just encourage me to think.
Right.
Um,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, that'd
Can I ask
be
you
absolutely, absolutely. Go
yeah,
ahead.
ask you a question? So I'm just curious about what this podcast is for you and what like where are you coming from with it?
Right. So this podcast is a way for me to make connections
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
obviously like learning how to talk to people that I hold in really high regard, and try to get insight from them. It's also to help my friends and my colleagues
Hmm.
to know what it looks like to be on that level. Um, so that's why I had so many questions about your experience because it's really valuable to me, and it's something I strive for as well. So thank you very much. Um, I'm gonna look back at to this podcast as well, just when I am stuck, when I have to make big decisions. So I really appreciate you for that.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity. I think what you're doing is really smart and just I'm thank you for asking and more than happy to continue conversations, just in the office anytime you want.
Um,
And I really am so impressed that you're taking advantage of, you're doing your education and you have
mm,
this job, this student job working while you're learning, but you really are making the most of it by really trying to extend your learning and really learn from the job and taking the most of it. And I think that's really, I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed. So yeah, anything you want to do to sort of continue to support your learning, definitely let me know and let the team know because we're here to work with you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.